Lord, help us to see you more clearly, to love you more dearly, to follow you more nearly, day by day. Amen. Everyone, this morning I want to talk a little bit about our Old Testament readings that we've had for the past few months, actually. Because we've been focusing so much on the gospel, we haven't really talked a lot about what's been happening in the Old Testament recently. We're in year A of the church lectionary, so we're going through the book of Genesis. And a couple of months ago, we started down this path when God made a promise to Abraham. Right? God made a promise to Abraham to say, I will love you and I will love your people. Your children will be my children. You'll be more numerous than the stars in the sky. It was a promise God had made of blessing. And that was a promise that got handed down from Abraham onto his son Isaac and his family, and then on to Jacob, and then from Jacob on to Joseph and Joseph's family. And then something happened with Joseph's family. His brothers, as you may remember from a couple of weeks ago, Joseph's brothers, who were jealous of him, decided that the best thing to do would be to beat him up, throw him into a pit, and sell him into slavery. So there's brotherly love for you there. So what happened to God's blessing? What happened to this blessing? It seemed dubious that God's will was going to happen here. But lo and behold, last week we heard that what happened was that Joseph had actually, in Egypt, as a slave, had found himself in a position to save the people of Egypt, to actually become a great leader of the community during their time of drought and strife, and made a great kingdom for himself, and even was able to bring his family to Egypt and save all of them too. And there's this amazing moment of profound forgiveness and love when Joseph looks at his brothers and is able to forgive them and say, you meant this thing to me for ill, but God used it for good. It sounds touching and reassuring, and I hear we in the Christian circles, we use this message frequently to look at Joseph's story and say, okay, when hardships fall on us in our lives, God will use it for good in some way, and it gives us hope and promise. Then, this week, one Sunday later, right, this very week, we see what happened to that promise when, right after Joseph brought all of his family to Egypt, their descendants all end up enslaved. Again. They're all enslaved. The entire Hebrew people in horrible hardship and slavery in Egypt. And it then anybody else feel like it kind of undermines the message of God used it for good in this world when all of a sudden they all end up enslaved? So what are we to make of this? What are we to make of this? Well, I think it looks like a lot like our lives. It looks a lot like real human lives that are, they're complicated. Sometimes they're a little bit of a mess of blessings and tragedies woven together. I'm sure a lot of us in our lives, we can think of examples of those sort of bittersweet moments when something is a blessing and a tragedy kind of at the same time. If you've sent your child off to college and they've left the home and it's a blessing. You're glad that they're going off to college, but it's tragic. They're leaving your home and you're losing them in that place. Or maybe you had the matriarch of your family has died and the son had to step up and then be the new leader of the family, the new spiritual head of that family. And there's a tragic loss in the matriarch dying. But there's a blessing in that it created an opportunity for this man to step up and be a leader in a way that maybe he had never been before. Our lives are complicated in that way. And I think we can look at the Old Testament here, and what we see is a very real story of the complicated, interwoven nature of blessing and tragedy working together. That yes, it was a great tragedy that Joseph's brothers betrayed him, but without that, he would never have had the blessing to be able to save the Egyptian people. And without blessing and saving the Egyptian people, they never would have been able to enslave all the Hebrews. So great tragedy came from that. But without that, it would not have created the place for Moses to rise up and be the great prophet and great leader of the people, continuing a tradition, the Judeo-Christian tradition. And it stretches all the way to the gospel. It stretches all the way to the gospel when you see Jesus bestowing a great blessing on Peter by being able to say, "You're the rock. You're the rock on which I will build my church." It's a profound blessing. But you know what? It only happens after the tragedy of Jesus' sacrifice and dying. And then after his death and sacrifice, there's the great blessing in his resurrection. Just to then have him ascend and leave, and which creates the place for us to be the church. So I think when I look at this Old Testament story, I look at a story that we are involved in to say, let's pause and realize that our lives are complicated. And there's always going to be this interwoven tangle of blessing and tragedy. And that maybe the best thing for us to do is recognize it. Recognize God's presence in it. That when we have blessing in front of us, to be thankful for that. To not take it for granted. And to give thanks and to share of the blessings that we have. And to realize that the tragedies that we have, they're profound moments for us to receive comfort from our loved ones, for us to become more empathic toward others who are struggling. It allows us to learn hard lessons so that we grow and become better people and do the work God calls us to do. So let us take this messy, complicated tangle of blessing and tragedy and realize that it's in the midst of that we do the work of being the church. And when we do that, we are continuing a tradition that stretches all the way back to the promise God made to Abraham, to say, "I will make you my people. Your children will be my children. And I will make you more numerous than the stars in the sky." And with that, we say, thanks be to God. Amen.